I was at a diabetes event recently when a physician stood on stage and said something that genuinely stunned me. He said people with diabetes wouldn't end up in DKA if they just managed their sugar better. And then, with full confidence, he added, if they are admitted, obviously they failed at managing their sugar. So we're not going to let them dose their own insulin. Someone took a photo of my face at that moment, and it looked like I had unlocked a new facial expression called, what the hell did he just say? Hi, I'm Sina, a clinical pharmacist, startup founder, and my fiancée is living with type 1 diabetes. And that was the moment I realized something very simple and very uncomfortable. There's a massive gap between people who talk about diabetes and the people who actually live with it every hour of their lives. I realized in that conference that this truly matters because what he said isn't just wrong, it's a symptom of a much bigger issue inside healthcare. The assumption that having a medical degree automatically means you understand diabetes better than the people living with it. Managing diabetes is hard work. And I truly understood that once me and my fiancé moved in together about 4 years ago. Within 6 months, I learned more about diabetes than I had ever learned throughout my entire studies or career. And clinicians often never see that reality. So I asked on a type 1 support group on Facebook, where I was a member of for some time, if others felt the same way as I did. And I was humbled. Almost 2,000 reactions, more than 800 comments at the time that I'm posting this video. Personal messages started flowing in, sharing how they resonated with my thoughts. And I'm so touched with how much support I've received. Support from real people living with real struggles who are living with diabetes every single day. I felt I had to do something about this. I wanted to talk about how much training clinicians actually get in regards to diabetes. So, endocrinology, the specialty which focuses mainly on the endocrine system, is a 2-year fellowship after residency, typically after internal medicine specialization, depending, of course, on the region and the university and the country. The structure varies according to most curriculums in the US and Canada. The first year is heavy clinical work, and the second year is largely research focused. In Europe, internal medicine is not a prerequisite in all countries, but still, a few years of combined inpatient visits and research is not merely enough to prepare a physician 100%, as they're not solely and definitively concentrated on only diabetes, let alone differentiate the schemes for type 1s and type 2s. Realistically, that means limited concentrated time specifically on diabetes. And here's what the training actually looks like when you ask the fellows themselves. A 2022 study published in JGIM surveyed US adult endocrinology fellows. Even among specialists, many, almost half, were not confident using diabetes technology, pumps, CGMs, closed-loop systems. These are the devices that millions of people rely on every day. I have left the link to the study in the description so you can have a look and read it on your own. It is an eye-opener, depending on, how your eye is actually situated right now. So the gap is real, not because clinicians don't care, but because the system gives them a fraction of the exposure to the realities of type 1 diabetes compared to what patients live with in a single month. Even for type 2s. Here is the uncomfortable truth. People with diabetes accumulate more practical expertise in their first 6 months of living with it than many clinicians do in 6+ years of formal training. Well, again, not because clinicians are incompetent, but because the system trains them to memorize and not to actually live with diabetes. When a clinician believes diabetes is simply not taking care of yourself, the patient becomes the problem, not the physiology. And that's how we end up with the arrogance of, we'll take over your insulin. You clearly can't handle it. Well, DKA is one of those situations where you can tell two completely different stories about the exact same event. And both stories could be technically true. For example, hospitals often document DKA as missed insulin. That's the checkbox. Technically true. Insulin wasn't taken, or wasn't absorbed, or didn't reach the bloodstream for some reason. But here's the part that never makes it into the checkbox. Most real-world DKA is triggered by things that the patient didn't choose and couldn't control. Infections, vomiting, illnesses, pump occlusions, spoiled insulin from heat or prescription delays, insurance denials, rationing, pharmacies out of stock, or just simply being misdiagnosed for days before anyone thought of checking ketones. All of this is documented in ADA and endocrine literature as leading causes of DKA. So yes, missed insulin is true, and yes, the system failed the patient before the patient failed themselves is also true. Same physiology, same hospital admission, two frames. One blames the patient, the other explains the reality. So why am I starting this channel? Well, because I believe diabetes deserves better conversations than the ones happening in conference rooms. Because misinformation isn't just on TikTok. It's also spoken on stages by people in white coats. Because the lived experience deserves the same authority as the textbook definition. And because someone needs to bridge the gap between research, reality, and the people trapped in between. My goal isn't to attack clinicians or anybody for that matter. This channel is going to do mainly three things. We're going to break down complex diabetes topics with actual evidence. No vibes, no trends, no pharmaceutical fairy tales. We're going to talk about things that textbooks typically ignore. Burnout, relationships, sex, body image, alarm fatigue, tech anxiety. We're going to ask the questions that, well, a lot of people avoid to ask. Why insulin pricing still makes no sense. Diabetes, relationships, body positivity, literal devices on bodies. How do partners see it? Are GLP-1s good for type 1s? A history of diabetes technology, where we were, where we are now, where are we going? Whether a cure is actually getting closer, or is it just not profitable to attempt to cure the disease? You know, things we should be talking about. Now, I'm not claiming to be a diabetes expert or anything that I say should be considered as medical advice. I like to research and I like to share what I learn. If I make any mistakes, please let me know in the comments and I will make sure to address them in my next videos. Now, if you've ever felt talked down to, dismissed, misdiagnosed, or misunderstood, this channel exists for you. If you're a clinician who actually wants to understand what your patients live with, welcome. And if you're living with diabetes, you already understand what this channel needs to exist. So tell me, what's the one thing you wish clinicians truly understood? Are there any topics you would like me to cover? Drop them in the comments. And this is no sugarcoating. Thank you for watching.